This is the story of Nabal's vineyard, and it's a good one. The title of the message is A Justifiable Rebellion Against a Rebel. Now, you would think normally your job is to obey those in authority, and you're to do what they say and all that stuff, and you should. However, there's a time you don't. If they tell you to go against something God's told you, you suddenly reveal who you think is your authority by who you obey. If a Christian gives up to the government when God says don't or do, and the government says something else, you've replaced God with the government. This picture always gets me. This is everybody standing there saluting Hitler with the Heil Hitler, and this guy's got his arms folded. He's not about to salute. Okay, he's in rebellion against Hitler. We've got a similar case here in our Bible. Our text gives us an account of a justifiable insurrection or rebellion against authority. Now, it's only legitimate because it's actually submission to God, the true authority. You always have to submit. You're either submitting to the government because it's of God, or you're submitting in opposition to them to God. Our job is submit, submit, submit. Jack Howells had a little phrase that he said. This was years and years ago, but it stuck with me. He said this: make a decision before the decision, so when you get to the decision, you don't have to make a decision. That's true. If you don't have any lines in your mind that cannot be crossed, every line you come to, you've got to decide, am I going to make a decision to be on this side or that side? No, right now sit down and decide where the lines are. Then when you get to the line, you know I can't cross that right there. You don't have to make that decision. You've already done it. That's what this man does. Look at our text. 1 Kings chapter 21, verse 1. And it came to pass after these things that Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard which was in Jezreel, hard by the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. And Ahab spake unto Naboth, saying, Give me thy vineyard, that I may have it for a garden of herbs, because it is near unto my house, and I will give thee for it a better vineyard than it. Or, if it seem good to thee, I will give thee the worth of it in money. And Naboth said to Ahab, The Lord forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee. Verse 25. But there was none like unto Ahab, which did sell himself to work wickedness in the sight of the Lord, whom Jezebel his wife stirred up. We read this story, and you know the story. Jezebel gets some fake witnesses out there to push this false narrative that Nabal has blasphemed God. So she's going to accuse him of what she's been doing. Sound familiar? And put him to death, and that's exactly what happens. But God lays the blame for this not at Jezebel. Look at verse 25. Ahab sold himself to work wickedness. Whew. I would read that story and put the blame on Jezebel. It's not what God did. God said there's nobody, including Jezebel, like Ahab. He sold himself to work wickedness. So we'll do some comparison today. We know in our passage there's good and evil, very clear and plainly laid out. Notice in verse 1, the farmer and the furlough. In verse 1, he says, Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard which was in Jezreel, hard by the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. Why is Ahab in Jezreel? Where's he king? Of the northern tribes. But where's the northern tribes' capital? Said it right there in the verse. Samaria. What's he doing in Jezreel? Vacation home. It's a pretty spot. He decided he's going to move there. He's on furlough. But not Naboth. That's where he lives. He's doing his chores just like he does every day. Now some, what do they call them, winter birds or snowbirds? Some snowbird moves into town and says, sell me your parsonage there, buddy. I need it. Jezreel, let's find out where this Jezreel is. It's a city. It's a city here situated in the plain of Jezreel or the plain of Megiddo. It's between Gilboa and Little Hermon. I know you don't know where Little Hermon is, but that's Moreh. You'll find that's where Gideon went. Jezreel itself is on the brow of a steep rocky cliff about 100 foot up and is a strong central position in that valley that gives you a view both of Jordan on the east and Carmel on the west. And so you've got a good view of that whole valley right there. So it's a good spot for a king to put his house. Now, what's everybody number one thing they want in a house? A good view. They want to see outside the house. Now, you want a good look in the house as well, but you want it to be situated in a pretty place. And that's what he's done right here. This becomes Ahab's chief resident. Even though the capital is in Samaria, he likes living here. If you had that house, you'd like it too. The Bible called it an ivory house in 1 Kings 22:39. I'm not going to make you read it. It's situated on the wall of the city of Jezreel. You find that when they finally get a hold of Jezebel, he says, throw her out the window. Okay, well, he's come up to the city of Jezreel. She's in the wall. Her house is in the wall. She's looking out that window. They throw her out. It says her blood splattered on the wall. So his house, this ivory palace, is built into the wall of Jezreel. Probably quite a thing to look at. There's two springs in the valley just down from the hill that are east of the city. One is 12 minutes from town. The other is 20 minutes. One of them they call the Spring of Jezreel. The other one's called Herod's Spring. And that spring-fed ground right there makes an ideal spot for a vineyard. And so, guess what? There's a vineyard there. Look at verse 1. It says, Nabal the general, Nabal the Jezreelite had a vineyard. Didn't say he was trying to get one. Didn't say he was trying to grow one. He had it. It was already there. In the Bible, a vineyard's often surrounded by a wall or vines or some sort of a barrier in order to keep what shouldn't be in out and vice versa. Now, that's a good thing. If you got something you like, you build a wall around it. That's why all the Democrats in Washington have built a wall around Corruption Center. Amen. A wall is good. Division is good if you want to keep distinct divisions. In the Bible, God compares Israel to a vineyard many times. Some of Jesus Christ's own parables, he referred to a vineyard in those. Vineyards are associated with a settled, peaceful, nice place. That's what you think of when you think of the vineyard. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, Deuteronomy 6, verse 10. Here he's going to describe Israel, Canaan, the land he's going to bring the Israelites to. Deuteronomy 6, verse 10. And it shall be, when the Lord thy God shall have brought thee into the land which he sware unto thy fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give thee great and goodly cities, which thou buildest not. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's a great thing. I don't have to do the work. Okay, so he's portraying to them, this is his sales pitch. I'm going to get you to this place that's just, I've been working on it myself. I've had all these heathens in there doing the construction work for you. And I'm going to give it to you. What's on the list? On the list, look at verse 11. Down there, probably second or third line from the bottom. Vineyards. That's one of the things that's over there. God's already seen to it that there's vineyards in this land that he's going to take them to. That's a good thing. That's a blessing. In Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 25, it says, and they took strong cities and fat land. Doesn't that sound good? Fat land. You don't want no skinny land. Give me some fat land. And possessed houses full of goods, wells digged. They didn't even have to do their own digging. Vineyards, there it is, and olive yards, and fruit trees in abundance. So they did eat and were filled and became fat. Well, you live on fat land, you get fat. And delighted themselves in the great goodness. That's what God had intended for them. He had this thing all set up. On the list is vineyards. That's a good thing. Nabal's got him a vineyard. That's good. That shows God's blessing. He's right where he should be. Now, just because you're in a vineyard doesn't mean that it's vacation time. That's farming. That requires work. Ezekiel 28, verse 26. This is talking about the millennium. Ezekiel 28, verse 26. Talking of Israel, the nation. And they shall dwell safely therein, and shall build houses. And there it is, plant vineyards. Yea, they shall dwell with confidence. When I have executed judgment upon all those that despise them round about them, and they shall know that I am the Lord their God. Okay, the time you're in the pretty spot is when you know God, he's doing judgment, and he gives you a vineyard. Good spot. That's one spot, or that's one thing about the vineyard. Vineyard is a peaceful, you know you're in the will of God spot. That's good. Every Christian should be there. Vineyards are important because they're a source of agriculture. That gives you food. We need food. Now, in America, we think we need Walmart. No, you need a farmer is what you need. You need a cattle herder. You need the actual food. People think that you shouldn't go out and kill animals. Just go to Walmart and buy your beef. You know? Exactly. If you don't understand, that comes from somewhere. Somebody's been doing some work to get it. Okay, there's coming a day, probably not too far off, that famine's going to strike and America's going to learn some hard lessons. The Great Depression, they learned some hard lessons. By now, we've all forgotten it. So we'll get a refresher course. Deuteronomy 20, verse 6, the Bible says this. What man is he that hath planted a vineyard and hath not eaten of it? Okay, there he's talking about we're going to war, and I'm going to ask you a question. Is there a soldier here today that has planted a vineyard and you've not seen your first harvest? Okay, if that's so, you go back and enjoy your harvest. You can't go to battle this time. God intends you to enjoy the fruit of your labor. Spiritually, you should have planted a harvest or planted a vineyard and gotten a harvest. You should see some growth. You should see something from your spiritual effort. And that should be enjoyable to you. That's part of it. God doesn't intend you to be a miserable wreck the rest of your life. No, the fruit of the Spirit is to benefit you. Don't you love fruit? I do. Judges chapter 14. Judges 14, verse 5. Then went Samson down to his father and his mother to Timnath, and came to the vineyards of Timnath. And behold, a young lion roared against him. Here's Timnath. Timnath, the whole town has one vineyard. Okay? Obviously, that's to feed the town. That's a good thing. As a Christian, what you reap in your vineyard is not just for you to sit on and get fat and happy with. We should be sharing what we've harvested. That's what I do. That's what Chris does. And that's what everybody who's a Christian that talks about their Christianity does. They're sharing their harvest with somebody else. That's good. It shouldn't just stay with you. 2 Kings 25. This is Nebuchadnezzar coming through and depopulating Samaria. 2 Kings 25, verse 11. Now the rest of the people that were left in the city, and the fugitives that fell away to the king of Babylon, with the remnant of the multitude, did Nebuchadnezzar, the captain of the guard, carry away. Took them off. But not all of them, verse 12. But the captain of the guard left of the poor of the land to be vine dressers and husbandmen. What's the little the nursery rhyme? Don't throw me in that briar patch. You don't know that story? Brer Rabbit. Yeah, that's it. That was his home, was in the briar patch, and he's saying, just don't throw me back into that briar patch. You can do anything to me you want to, just don't throw me in that briar patch. He wanted to go to the briar patch. Guess what? You know what the king did here? Or he's at this time of the captain of the guard, Nebuchadnezzar. He takes the poor people and says, I got a tough job for you poor people. Go out there and you work on the vineyards. That's a spot to be. And the poor people got it. Guess what? This world is going to look at us and consider us nothing and poor. And to them we are, because we value different things. But if you got the vineyard, and you should have it, you got everything you need. That's perfect. You're right where you want to be. The vineyard was a sign of wealth. In 1 Samuel 22, verse 7, Saul's deeds have found him out. And he's trying to give his political speech here on, I'm Saul and I approve this message. Then Saul said unto his servants that stood about him, Hear now, ye Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards? Nope, didn't need to. God already saw to it. Now, just because Saul's been acting wicked and God's been drying up the vineyards, that's not about Saul or David. That's about people's actions and God's reaction. Over and over you find this. I'm going to skip through so we can get somewhere today. Let's go down to the next point. 1 Kings 21, verse 2. 1 Kings 21, verse 2. Next thing I see in our passage is the inventor and the employee. And Ahab spake unto Naboth, saying, Give me thy vineyard, that I may have it for a garden of herbs. You know what he's going to do? He's going to tear it up and plant herbs. It was already a vineyard. Why would you destroy that? So you could put some onions in the ground. Doesn't seem very smart. You know, he had a good idea in his little head. You know, I'm over here in Jezreel. Back in Samaria, I had me an herb garden. You know, and that gave me some spices on all this food that I eat. I need me an herb garden. And it would be convenient. You know, that spot I can see from right out my window. If we could get rid of all of those, you know, vineyards, I don't know what it was, grapes or whatever he had in that vineyard, we'll get rid of all that and we'll plant us some herbs. That's going to be my spices. That's my spice rack down there. He's imagining. Now, our imagination will go rampant with us if we let it. God had already told them, I've planted some vineyards. Vineyards are a special thing. When you find one, don't tear it up. But he's an inventor. That's the man who says, I've never done construction work in my life, but I want you to do this and this and this. And those two sticks won't fit together. And you know it because you've tried to do it before. But on paper, he's put them together. That's what Ahab's doing right here. He's got him some grand plans. He didn't consult with the regulations. You know, he didn't pull the permit. The permit, as God said, I will not permit it. Look at it in verse 2. I call this commerce versus consecration. It says after the first colon, And I will give thee for it a better vineyard than it. Or if it seem good to thee, I will give thee the worth of it in money. He thinks that he can work a deal here. Everything is about money. Everything's a barter. And it was back then, basically. But not to God. They were living in a God economy. Not the world's economy. But Ahab had already sold himself. So he was living under a different set of rules. And he thought, his mind is already diluted. He automatically thinks everybody's doing the same thing. They're all living for the pocketbook and, the biggest house and the biggest whatever. That spot's convenient to me. I'll give you a better one. But it's not going to work. Leviticus chapter 25. Leviticus 25, verse 23. The land, that ground, shall not be sold forever. For the land is mine. God owns it. For ye are strangers and sojourners with me. You're my tenants. And I own that land. And I'm not going to have you selling it. You go through and you read that thing, and he's talking about if you have debts and so forth and so on, and somebody sells their property back and forth, that's okay, but it's only going to be for 7 years, and it better return back to the family that I said could own it. Because I've decided where the boundaries are going to be. Not you, Ahab. 7 years max if there's a problem. But if there ain't no problem, I don't want you selling it. Look at Deuteronomy 11. Deuteronomy 11, verse 10. For the land whither thou goest in to possess it is not as the land of Egypt, from whence ye came out, whether thou sowedest thy seed and waterest it with thy foot, as the garden of herbs. Who likes the garden of herbs? Egypt. No wonder Ahab wants him a garden of herbs. Verse 11. But the land whither ye go to possess it is a land of hills and valleys, and drinketh water of the rain of heaven, and the land which the Lord thy God careth for. Okay, no wonder we can't just willy-nilly pick it up and put a for sale sign, for sale by owner. No, you ain't the owner. God is. Look down at verse 13. And it shall come to pass, if ye shall hearken diligently unto my commandment which I command you this day, to love the Lord your God, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, that I will give you the rain of heaven in his due season, the first rain and the latter rain, that thou mayest gather in thy corn and thy wine, there's a vineyard, and thine oil. There it is. God says, look, it's my land. I care for it. I water it. You know what? We tap in and we get water from the ground, I guess. But in the old days, they depended on the rain. I think farmers still do. You can't control that. God controls it. He'll turn the spigot on or he'll turn it off. He's saying right here, this is my land. I've been caring for it for a long time. If you'll just do what I say, I'm going to let you live here. And I'll make sure that it grows nice and pretty for you. That's good. That doesn't mean there's no work involved. But it means that he's doing what you can't. The next thing I'll see is in verse 3. 1 Kings 21, verse 3. The servant and the sovereign. 1 Kings 21, verse 3. And Naboth said to Ahab, the Lord forbid me that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee. He speaks of two characters in this. The Lord and you. Only one of them's capitalized. The Lord. He doesn't even use Ahab by name or call him king. He's serving somebody much higher than Ahab. Good man. Isaiah 5, verse 3. God's talking about Israel, and he says this. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge, I pray you, betwixt me and my vineyard. God's asking for man to put his thinking cap on. God said, I planted me a vineyard. And something happened to this vineyard, and I want you to think about it and tell me what you see. Verse 4. What could I have done more to my vineyard? Did I not fertilize it right? Do I not understand how to grow a vineyard? Sure he does. Verse 5. Now go to, I will tell you what I will do with my vineyard. I will take away the hedge thereof, and it shall be eaten up, and break down the wall thereof, and it shall be trodden down. That's the same thing Ahab wanted to do. He wanted to get rid of the vineyard and plant him some herbs. Have an herb garden, spice rack. Don't need a wall for that. God says that's one of my curses. I'll allow the hedge to be removed. There won't be any boundary anymore. When there's no boundary, you will be overrun. What was good will no longer be. Ezekiel chapter 34. Ezekiel 34 verse 2. Where do we see it in our day? Right here. Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God unto the shepherds, Woe be to the shepherds of Israel that do feed themselves. Should not the shepherds feed the flocks? Yeah. Not just feed on the flocks, feed the flocks. Okay, every Christian in this age is a shepherd. You're supposed to be helping somebody. Okay, don't just get it. It's great. I'll tell you, we don't have many people feeding themselves nowadays, but it's great to get in that Bible and get something. That's good. That's you getting fed. Don't stop there. Pass it on. Find somebody you can give it out to. What I've found in my life is if I don't give out everything I've been given, I won't get more. Look at it in chapter 46, Ezekiel 46, verse 18. Ahab didn't know this. He learned it. Ezekiel 46, 18. Moreover, the prince shall not take of the people's inheritance by oppression, to thrust them out of their possession, but he shall give his sons inheritance out of his own possession, that my people be not what? The definition of Israel in the New Testament. Scattered. In many places in the Old. Every man from his possession. Whew. Israel became scattered because they didn't obey simple rules. The problem in modern Christianity is a lack of any biblical stand on anything that a man's willing to die for. Think about it. Where's your boundary line that if threatened, you'd be willing to die versus cross over the line? Not many people have one. Whew. Naboth was not only willing, but did die for his. You know what his line was? I'm not selling my vineyard. Even though you want to pay me more than it's worth. Wow. That'd be tough. That'd be tough. I'm sure Ahab had some good spots he could offer him. Would have been appealing to the eyes. Naboth said, nope, it's the law. You find something else in this story, you don't find any sons with him. You don't find any wife. He's working this vineyard all alone. I mean, it doesn't say, maybe he's not. He may have had a crew there, I don't know. But I sure don't read anything about him. It could be he's just slogging away every day after day by himself out there growing the vineyard. Because that's what he was told to do. Would have been a vacation to take some money and find his own Jezreel. He didn't do it. He had a line he wouldn't cross. I understand this statement. Let me give it to you. You've heard this said before. If persecution comes to the American church, I hope I am strong enough to hold firm to my faith. I understand the sentiment behind that. However, the problem with that statement is it's already making an excuse for failure. Don't say, I hope. Make a line in the sand. I won't cross this line. Now, it's not you saying it. If I told you to make up your own mind where your line was, you'd do what was comfortable to you, and so would I. We don't do that as Christians. We say, God, show me where the line is. Okay, I'm not going to move 1 inch beyond it. Determine it. There's about 4,000 commands in the Bible. Yeah, that's all. There's about 4,000. Every Christian should have at least a dozen that he'll earnestly contend for to the death. Go home when you get home today and write yours out. Find the line. There's about 4,000 in there, maybe more. You should have found some. I'm not going to tell you what they are. You'll find them yourself, and you might know some I don't know about. God will reveal them to you. Find yours. Write them down. because if you don't write them down, you won't be able to come up with them. And that can be your line in the sand. And like Naboth, you'll be willing to die for that one. So in conclusion, get a vineyard, maintain it, and if need be, die for it.